What's up, everyone? I'm James Baney, and I'm here with Kyle Larson, and we are getting ready to do a review and then spoiler discussion on The High Republic, The Rising Storm. Stick around. All right, Kyle, here we are. We got a big one to talk about. This is going to be, I don't want to say it's going to be a long video, but it's definitely going to be a heavy one.
Right.
We are going to do this review first. So there are no spoilers at this point. We will let you guys know when we get into spoilers. So as of now, you can kind of consider this just our general review. We're going to give our scores. We're going to give our initial thoughts, and we're going to talk about maybe how this book could what other books are maybe similar to this one for fans of blank in this section. And then we'll get into the spoilers and we'll talk about our favorite parts and discussions and stuff like that. As of now, right before we get started, let me talk a little bit about the book. This book was released on June 29th, 2021, and was written by Cavan Scott. It was read, the audiobook, by Mark Thompson, classic
great
voice
Mark
here.
Thompson, yes.
And this one was published by Del Rey, and the audiobook was Random House Audio. Now, the timeline for this one is after The Light of the Jedi, and it's concurrent with Race to Crash Point Tower, which we also have another video on this channel, what happened in that book, and a kind of spoiler discussion and review of that book similar to this one. Now that we kind of have a feel for that, let's get into our initial thoughts and score. I'm going to go ahead and let you go first on this one. What was your score for this book?
So I gave this book a very high score. I gave it a 9.5 because I loved it. I really did. I just was floored. I was lucky enough to receive an advanced review copy, and I just flew through it. Like, it was a page turner. It was one of those books that I was thinking about when I wasn't reading it, and like I couldn't wait to get home from work or something, because I didn't actually read it in one day, but I blew through it pretty fast, and I happened to be kind of busy at the time, but it was just, I just thought it was a really wonderful story. Cavan Scott, the way that he honored everything that kind of had come before it, but then built upon it. Like I felt like I knew all these characters already, but then the fact that he was able to peel back so many layers for each of them, just the action, didn't distract from that, didn't distract from the emotional weight of what was going on, because some of those books can be kind of flashy with that stuff, but this really, you felt like you were in it with the characters. I genuinely felt like that. I was, when bad things would happen to them, I was like, oh no, I hope this person is okay, and just really got me invested in the book. So I was thrilled, and I've said this before, and I know the only reason I use this film is because it's kind of the gold standard for a lot of fans, is that this was the Empire Strikes Back for me. I had that as soon as I started reading it, because Cavan didn't shy away from going deeper into what had happened before, going deeper into the trauma that these people all felt from the events of the first book, and how it's weighing with them and driving them to survive in this story. So yeah, what did you think?
I did not give it that high of a score. I usually rate mine on a scale of like 5 is my medium. Like I'm like, I could take it or leave it, and anything below a 5 is when I start to dislike it. But anything above a 5, I like. And compared to Light of the Jedi, which is a book that I really did like, I gave this one a higher score, but not by a lot. 7.6 for me on this one, which I don't know if you're on like a grading, like a school thing, that I don't know, I'd probably say it's like a B, like a flat B, probably. Right. I did like this book a lot, and I think you are right on there is a lot of action in this, and none of the action ever takes away from the weight and the gravity of what's going on in the book. I think I would say one of my biggest faults to this book is very contrary to what you were saying, where you like couldn't wait to get back into it. I felt it was very slow for the first 40% of the book. I felt that section of the book was set up, and it's detailed and it's all there. And when everything gets into motion and, the main events actually start to happen, I'm like, wow, this is great. And I'm glad that we knew a lot about these characters and all this stuff. But reading it, I felt it was very hard to get through till a certain point in the book happens. And then you're like, okay, now we can start to move forward with this. And the rest of the story was very heavy, very full of compelling storytelling. If this was a movie, would be amazing, right? I'm 100% with you on that. Just to compare it to some books, let's do something a little different. We're going to go for fans of what other books do you say compare to this one?
Oh gosh. It reminded me a lot of Resistance Reborn. That was the one that really kept coming back into my head, because that was also such a compelling novel where like all the characters, it's like characters kind of coming together across different stories that you've read before, and they're all just trying to stay alive. They're trying to survive. And that's what I felt this book was to me. It had this, I flew through it the same way, even though it's a kind of a different story, but I flew through it. It had the same cadence to me. And, people kind of dropping in without that. Yeah. But
yeah, man. No, it's so crazy to me that you say that, but you don't say why I feel like it's so perfectly compared in this case. Resistance Reborn is a book about the current state of government on the verge of what they don't realize is about to shake everything up.
Right.
Like, and you're comparing it in the character sense, but I'm like, no, it's the New Republic. The New Republic seems stable. There's this enemy. We don't really think that enemy's that big of a threat, but we all know it's obviously going to be the big threat. You know what I mean? It's right on the verge of everything falling apart. That's a good comparison.
Yeah,
I like that one a lot.
Yeah.
I said, and you'd say this too, Light of the Jedi, obviously.
Yeah,
if you read Light of the Jedi, you need to be reading this book.
Yeah.
That's easy. A couple other ones that I put were Dooku, Jedi Lost, and Master and Apprentice. And the reason I put both of those books is I felt there was this, if you are into the idea of the Jedi as this established system of characters, and you're interested in the ins and outs and the levels and how they all work together and how they're really like the protectors of the galaxy and stuff like that, in a time where there really isn't a lot of conflict, but yet they're still like having some battles here and there and things to overcome, and how their opinions all kind of are different from each other, but they're all like collectively the same.
Right.
I don't know. I found that very similar in these books in the High Republic, because like you were saying with the other book, like we're right on the verge of something crazy happening. And when I'm reading Dooku and when I'm reading Master and Apprentice, these take place before the Phantom Menace happens. And it's like, it kind of gives you this idea of like, I don't know, man, Darkseid's been gone for 1,000 years, but what if it comes back? You know?
Right.
Like all of a sudden that we could be on the verge of something really crazy. So I feel like, but both good answers in that sense.
Yeah,
I think you'll get it. I think if you enjoyed those books, you'll absolutely love The Rising Storm. Let's get into spoilers now.
Yes.
From now on, we're talking spoilers. So if you have not read this book, you might want to add this to your favorites, come back later, check it out when you finish it up. But yeah, we're going to get into this book here. I'm going to start with you on this. What was your favorite part of the book, or your favorite thing about the book?
So I'll go with my favorite thing about the book first, and that kind of touches on why I liked it so much, was that, they really present the Jedi, and I think it goes along with the books that you found similar to. The Jedi are so human in this book, because in Light of the Jedi, they almost seemed like superhuman to me in a way, and in this really kind of brought them back down to earth and made them a lot more relatable to me, especially people like Elzar and well, all of them. I mean, Elzar and Bell specifically, really, like, you really see those two struggling a lot, and Loden as well. And, you know, and you also, you know, you meet somebody who was once part of the Jedi Order, and she stepped away from that because she just, you know, we don't really know why, but she stepped away from that to kind of find her own path. And she's brought back and kind of connected to them without, you know, being like, hey, I'm a Jedi, but, you know, is connected back to that bond and joins them and fights with them, that being Ty York. So that was like my favorite thing about that, is how it really, you know, made the Jedi, again, these characters more relatable and less kind of like demigod-ish as they were in Light of the Jedi. And then my favorite scene, you know, there's a couple different parts where you see this, but is when they're fighting on the anvils. I think anvils are what they're called, those flying pterodactyl animals that, and just the way that they communicate. I mean, that kind of, I don't know, that kind of
very
symbolism.
Avatar-ish.
Yeah, we've seen that in like Avatar. We've seen that in Game of Thrones. We've seen, you know, people riding these kind of predator birds in the sky to do what they need to do. But in here, it's so cool because there's, you know, like the Jedi they have an understanding, and these animals, these creatures, they kind of have a choice about it. They kind of have their agency, and they're like, yeah, you know, we didn't really even want to be here, but now that we are, we're not going to let these guys like bust up the planet, because they've basically like broken out of this giant zoo that is part of the Republic Fair to showcase different species around the galaxy. So that was my favorite scene, I guess. You know, you get it from a couple different perspectives, a couple different characters participating. But I thought that was really cool. How about yours?
My favorite part was Elzar Man's like frantic turn to the dark side.
Right, that was cool too.
Yeah. There was something about this where, like, first of all, you know, you get Light of the Jedi, and he has this big, like, crazy vision, almost like Tony Stark-esque, you know, like, I saw Captain's shield broken, you know, kind of thing. Right. He gets this crazy vision of the future. And this book starts right back up where he's like, I can't seem to reconcile with that. So he goes to the planet and he calms himself down, and he sees these visions of Valo. And then when things start going wrong, he starts to get the bad visions back again. And this really causes him to go crazy. It's the dark side seeping into him. And at this point, when he does this big dark side attack, I don't know, it felt like, I'm trying to pull from like all forms of media. Like, it felt like in Jurassic Park or something like that, like you watch a scene of the T-Rex like annihilating somebody, and then it like roars really loudly, and then you cut to like somebody who's like 10 miles away, and they hear that roar. Right. And it just, no matter where you are, when that happened, it felt like everybody, it was so well written, it felt like everybody, including me, could like walk outside and see it happening over there, like over the mountaintops or something. It felt very widespread. When that attack happened, everybody around them felt it and knew something terrible had happened, or they could see it happen, but they didn't know what it was. They just, boom, like something crazy. And then what was so wild is after that happened, I mean, when it was happening, I was like, oh, this is it. This is Elzar Mann's story. He's going dark. This is where the High Republic's going. He's the Anakin character or whatever. And then like they start making you think like, no, he's got it under control. And now at the end of the book, I'm like, I don't know. Yeah. And that's exciting to me. I'm like, I don't know what this character's fate is. He's so very clearly like had an Anakin moment where he like grabs someone's neck and chokes him and kills him and is like, I did it for the right reasons. But now I'm back to being a good guy. And you're like, something's up with this scene, man. I'm not getting the right vibe from this person. I don't think he would have done that. And I think this is foreshadowing him down the line. But I can't be certain of that because he continues to like play the dark side, but as a character, you know, and confronts other people and says he did it. So he recognizes that it's wrong. So I don't know, maybe he's on the road to reform or something. But that was my big thing. We can just get into general discussion of this book now. I want to quick say kind of what I was saying before. I felt like this book was in 3 major sections.
Yes.
40% of the book was set up to the attack. 40% of the book was the attack, the whole attack over Valo. And then the last 20% of the book was the wrap up. Like, now that the attack is over, how are the Nihil doing? How are the Jedi doing? Like, how is the Republic doing? And it was just kind of a wrap up of everything. I felt like the first 40%, the setup to this book, was very slow. It's not that it was bad. I was just like, and I kind of told you this before we got started, just general chat. It felt like when you have a big festival, like a big touring festival. I used to do Warped Tour stuff, so that kind of an idea. You have this big touring festival, but then maybe the day before, it's like the setup day, and you are there, and you're like, man, it feels like there's a lot going on, but nobody's really doing anything because the event hasn't started. It almost felt like the book hadn't started, and all of that 40% was just, we're there, and we're seeing what it's like in preparation and lead up to the Republic Fair, but nothing's really happening, And we also are getting this side note to Marchion Ro, and he's on this journey, and when we're going on the journey, we're just like, I don't know what he's doing, but it's multiple chapters of him going on this journey to get this thing, and it isn't until he finally gets it that I feel like the book almost starts 40% of the way into it. So I don't know. That's it. And then after that, I'm like, this book is amazing, and it just absolutely like picks up.
I totally hear what you're saying. Like I get that. One of the reasons I think I enjoyed it is, in one way, the book, there's a little, you can predict something bad is going to happen, because there's this really calm energy throughout the first 40% of the book. And I'm grateful that Kevin Scott took the time to do that, because when things go sideways, it starts moving really fast. And I think the fact that he took the time to paint such an elaborate picture of like what the Republic Fair is, what it looks like, what the planet looks like, who are the people there, why are they coming there, why are they doing this, that once everything is in motion, you're like, oh, okay, I get it. I get why this person is going to help this other person. I get why it's so important that, these people are kept safe, and, that kind of thing. I think that way, it's like, he shifts gears immediately as the attack happens, and you're like, okay, cool. I don't have to like turn back 20 or 30 pages or so to find out who this person was. I got a whole chapter with them, whatever they were doing for the fair. So, but I totally see your point too, whereas like, it is like a little bit of a slow burn,
Yes, so. and I totally agree with you. By the time you get to that point, you're very happy and with your place, like you understand everything, you know what's going on. Right. I feel it's important to set the state of the galaxy right now. That the Nihil attacks happened, the Great Disaster happened. We are rebuilding, we are resetting, we are bringing in more people. We're trying to get the Togruta people to join the Republic as a whole. We feel that would be a great asset to us, to employ our new, like, we are one people kind of thing. And all of that is important. And even as you're explaining it, I thought of another example that I hope you would agree with, which, by the way, this book absolutely is, if Light of the Jedi is A New Hope, this book is Empire Strikes Back. You said that before we started, and that is 100% correct. Going with that example, my slowness in the beginning would be like if you tacked 40 minutes onto the beginning of Empire Strikes Back, of them finding Hoth and setting up this base and establishing their hope that they're now hidden and the Empire is not going to find them, and that's an additional 40 minutes. But then, of course, we know that all of that setup is in vain, because as soon as the Empire shows up, you're like, okay, now the movie has started.
Right, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so you question a little bit of that, like, extra 40 minutes at the beginning of the movie. Was that necessary? Probably, but I still kind of argue there might have been a way to kind of give all of those same ideas in a more a shortened story.
Totally,
if you
that's
will,
totally
or
fair.
shortened amount of chapters or something along those lines. Another thing that I wanted to mention, and I think this is interesting, and I really didn't even realize it till the end of the book. Avar Kriss is not in this book.
No.
And she is, in a lot of ways, what I would consider to be the main character. Like, I absolutely consider Avar Kriss, Stellan Gios, and Elzar Mann to be the three main characters. They are the trilogy. They're the Han, Luke, and Leia. But Luke is the main character of Star Wars, and that to me is Avar Kriss. I feel like she was the focal point of all of the High Republic, and this being the next big lead, she's not in the book, and I found that very surprising. I was like, when is she going to show up? And then she like never did, and by the end of it, I'm like, she never came.
Right.
Not that it's a bad thing, just very surprising that like Luke wasn't in The Empire Strikes Back, to stick with the analogy.
I thought she was going to show up at some point during the battle. I hear that too. I mean, I don't know if I necessarily think that she's like the main character of. I think she is a very like important focal point for the High Republic. So I wasn't like,
interested.
I kind of like, I was expecting her to show up, but I feel like it didn't really like sway the story for me, and I was kind of glad that like, because we didn't.
I agree.
Yeah, we didn't get to know. I didn't feel like we got to know Elzar or Stellan very much in the Light of the Jedi. So I felt like that kind of made a little more room for characters like he and Ty to kind of come in and be a part of the story. Because you know, when Avar, we all know that, like how powerful she is and what she's capable of. So when she shows up, you know, that would kind of take away from those two characters. And I think Cavan, he's writing, you know, an entire comic series with her right now. So I think like he intentionally kind of put her on the other side of the galaxy, because I'm guessing that the next, you know, adult reader Del Rey High Republic book we get is going to center heavily on Avar Kriss, because she, like you said, like she's not there, but she is there at the same time, because this, you know, this trilogy or this trio of characters, she's a big part of that. And you know, her absence is felt very much by Elzar. Like he would very much like her to be there, and you know, that's a huge letdown for him when he thinks she's coming and she doesn't show up. And he's like, you know, because we learned they had a falling out at the end of the Light of the Jedi that we didn't end up seeing. You know, he tried to initiate a romance with her, and she was like, "No, dude, we can't do this anymore. Like we weren't supposed to be doing it in the first place, and we can't do it now."
100% agree that Avar not being in the book was shocking to me. Like walking out of The Force Awakens and being like, what? There, like Luke wasn't in that,
right,
you know, kind of thing. I know he was, but you know what I'm saying. Luke
I know.
Was not in that movie. Yeah. When you're expecting him to like show up on Starkiller or something. But that being said, does not take away from the book at all. And I 100% agree that this only was now like, you can look at Force Awakens and be like, oh, that was Han's movie. Like this was Stellan and Elzar's book. This was their relationship, and Avar just took a back seat in this one. She just wasn't in it, and this is like what they're going through in their characterization. 100% agree. I just wanted to throw that in there because I thought it was so surprising.
No, that's a good point. That's something I hadn't really thought of that much.
Next up on my list of things that I thought were kind of important that I wanted to talk about is the Leveler, Marchion Ro and the Tempest Runners. Basically like the Nihil, but like, wow, right? I feel like this has grown even more wild than it was in the last one. I felt like I almost kind of understood it. And I understood that Marchion Ro was a character that's like, he'll just throw that guy aside. You know, he destroys like a third of his army just for the sheer sake that he can, you know, to even further like control the rest of them.
Right.
Like, But I feel like he's like almost unstable at this point. He doesn't really know what's going on. What are your thoughts on Marchion Ro and his desire for this power that he potentially maybe believes is even worth more than having the army? Like, if he's got this power, what does he need the rest of the Nihil for?
Right. I mean, like, I think that it's a huge turning point for the character, because he's taken off his mask, which we know is kind of transformative for characters when they do that in Star Wars. And he's kind of exposed himself as like, yes, he's the eye still, but he's also like, he's shown his face to the galaxy. He's shown his face to other people. And he seems to be, it seems like the Isle were a means to this end, and he's reached the end. And that we're going to see a different person going forward, a much different villain. He suffered a pretty bad defeat again, but he suffered it in the first book, and he just kind of comes back stronger. And it kind of bears down on his hatred for the Jedi and what's behind it. And I thought it was really cool that Cavan Scott opens the book with, we're seeing his home world. We're learning about these, like, he considers himself a part of the path, whatever that is. We also know in other comics, ancillary material, there's this elders of the path that he's been looking on. And, he's infiltrated other cultures just to try to find out where this weapon might be, or where parts of this weapon might be. And it also ultimately ties back to his father too. So he's like, he's got this complex of like, he hears his father's voice in his head. It haunts him, and he's trying to like prove himself to the galaxy. He's trying to prove himself to the Jedi, and he's trying to prove himself to what he thinks is his father looking on. And it's just like, he's turned out to be this really incredibly like this dynamic character, whereas I kind of thought of him as like a glorified Mad Max villain in the first book.
Really?
Oh yeah, I mean, I liked him, but I thought he was kind of like, it reminded me of like the villains that you kind of encounter in the Mad Max movies. Like, they're just this theatrical kind of things, and then this book really hit it home for me that like, no, there is a person under this mask. There is a story there. So for some reason, that's how I took it in light of the Jedi. But I would like to go back and reread that book, because I feel like maybe I would pick up things I didn't notice about him in the first one. So
Marchion to me is becoming like one of my favorite villains in all of Star Wars. I can tell you this, that I read half of this book. Actually, who knows, man? This may even be the reason why I thought the first half was slow. I read physically like the actual text of half this book, and like the other half of the book was an audio book.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so that's interesting. I will say though that when I was reading the first part of the book, not even related to this, just something totally I was doing, I had this voice in my head, and I was like, what is that voice? And I kept hearing it, and I was like, it's some sort of villain or something, and I can't pick out who the character is. And then when I picked up the audiobook, I realized the voice that I was remembering, and it's Mark Thompson's Marchion Ro.
Oh, nice.
And it's haunting, man. Like,
okay,
I don't know how he does it. It's this really weird voice, and maybe if you just hear it, you'd be like, I don't know what's so special about that. But it's like, over the course of listening to him deliver these lines, and his plots and his thoughts, and how he wants to move forward, and his relationship with his father and all this, in this voice that seems so innocently evil. Like, I can't explain it. It's just Mark Thompson's delivery of his voice is just haunting, and I think that adds to a lot of this. I really like Marchion Ro because I think there's something really cool about Star Wars villains who don't have the Force. I love Vader. I love the Emperor. I get it. They're great villains. But I think one thing that has yet to really happen in like big Star Wars, like big fan Star Wars, is like the Thrawn style villain, which is kind of Tarkin, but I don't think A New Hope really showcased Tarkin well. I mean, it did, but like what Tarkin has become since that movie came out.
Right.
Is this idea of, like the comics, for instance, Tarkin defeated Vader. And he defeated Vader because Vader was powerful and he has the Force. But Tarkin is smart and he understands tactics, and he was able to trap him and like basically like blackmail him, like had him locked in, and made him bow to, you know, this non-Force user. I think that stuff's crazy. I think Tarkin's crazy. I think Thrawn is crazy. And Marchion Ro is absolutely one of these people that's like, he gets it in a very evil way. He gets it, and he doesn't have power. He's very weak. His body is fragile, but he knows what to do to control people and armies and cause devastation on mass accounts. You know, it's like, I think he's crazy. And I love Light of the Jedi because he turns on the lightsaber and just walks the lightsaber into that guy. Yeah. I'm like, you're insane. Yeah. And I don't know. I love this character, and I'm really excited to see that if the Nihil was just the means to his end, that now that he has the leveler and he has the Infinity Stones, if you will, like, what is his version of a snap? Right. What is his goal with this thing, and how is he going to wield this power on the galaxy at large?
Exactly. Yeah, and I know I totally, like, I'm right there with you now. Like, as I'm a huge fan of the character. Like, I'm, you know, he's by the end
Did
of the
I
book,
just sell you?
No. Before that, though, I hope I didn't misspeak before and make it. I think it was the Light of the Jedi. I wasn't like over the moon about him. But by the end of this book, I'm like, that's one of the people I'm thinking about the most, about like, where does this character go next? I mean, I have Out of the Shadows, which takes place after this, which I haven't read yet. So I need to like probably buckle down and do that. But I've definitely been thinking about where Marchion Ro goes from here, because he really comes out of it. So
what about Ty in this book? Ty Yorick, new character. Tell me what your thoughts about this character, where she starts, where she ends up, and where she's going. What do you think?
I really loved Ty. Like, I loved her introduction, how we kind of meet her when she's out on a job. And, you know, I felt like of all the characters, like, you know, her kind of monologuing when she would be thinking, that was like some of the best, you know, digging that Kevin did into the characters. So I love that scene where she's, you know, because we see the Drengir briefly in the story, and she's on the planet and she's helping that village, and they're like, we don't really have enough money to pay you, and she's like, okay, I'll, you know, like kind of listening to like her best self again. And then I also love how she, you know, kind of circles back. We don't really know what happened to make her leave the Jedi Order, but that the way that she circles back and comes back to it, and it's not about like, I'm never going to be a Jedi again, or I'm never going to do this again. She's just like, she realizes when she connects with Elzar, she's like, I just need to do what's right here in front of me right now. And that's a huge moment for a lot of characters in this story. But I love the idea of like this saber for hire, not, you know, almost like, you know, this hired gun that goes from like planet to planet, but she has a lightsaber instead. I love that they also didn't make her go like, it's not a matter of her being like, oh, she's a light side force user, she uses the dark side. It's just like, this is just part of her arsenal. This is just part of what she is and her equipment that she has to use. And she often, like, how she kind of, I don't remember if it's in this book or the Race to Crash Point, where she's just kind of like, to the Padawans, to the Jedi, like, you people need to lighten up about your Jedi Order thing. Like, there's a war going on right in front of you. Like, you need to just step up and do this. So I liked her very like matter of fact part of the way she looks at the galaxy and what's going on in the galaxy.
I'm very interested in the character, considering, you know, over 1,000 generations, the Jedi were the keepers of peace and all this, and and there have only been 20 that walked away.
Right.
That actually was at the point where they like walked away. And I've actually speculated about this before, like what the heck was going on, because you start to really think like, okay, Count Dooku was probably like the last one that they counted. Like he was probably number 20. But then like since then you had like Ahsoka that walked away, and you had Barriss Offee who walked away, and you had Pong Krell, which was like an evil. Like you could go through the Clone Wars and that era, and you're like, there's a ton of Jedi that were like all like falling apart.
Right.
What the heck was going on at that time? Because previous to this, there were only 20 over 1,000 generations, or probably more likely 1,000 years.
Yeah.
Right. I have to assume that Ty is one of these 20. The only thing that makes me think she might not be is they might only consider the lost 20 people who reached the rank of master, and I don't know if she did or not. So she might, like, maybe there were multiple Padawans that left, or knights that left.
Right.
Maybe that's maybe I'm discovering for myself.
Well,
if you guys know, just side note, shouting to you who watching the video, if you have an answer for that, a little bit more about the Lost 20 and what was considered one of the Lost 20. I always found it crazy that there were only 20, but yeah, Ty Oric is clearly like was in it, did the thing, and then was like, nah, I'm out. I've got problems with the way you guys run things, the way you guys think about things, and I'm just gonna do me. I'm going to continue to use my lightsaber, use the Force, but I'm going to do it differently. But she seemed really, not that it's a note against the character, but she seemed really easily swayed back.
Right. She kind of...
It felt a little bit like a, come on.
Yeah. Like...
And then she's like, fine, I'll fight with you guys again.
Yeah. No, and then about the Lost 22, I mean... it is going to be interesting, and we do know, I don't know if I want to say it, because there's a character reference in Dooku Jedi Lost about being a lost Jedi, and she's currently in one of the stories right now, like a regular character. So I'm kind of curious too to see if there's at any point, and it's a character that Kevin Scott's been writing, if he brings Ty York together with this character. So it should be interesting to see. So, but I bet we're going to get some sort of explanation. Yeah, it really is. It's all connected. It's like poetry.
I also kind of wanted to talk a little bit about, and I mentioned this before, and maybe I jumped the gun a little bit because I did write it down as one of the topics, but the relationship between Avar, Chris, Stellan, Geos, and Elzar Mann. I like I said earlier, I tend to think of those as like the big three of the High Republic. At which like all of the stories kind of are about them, and subsequently then under them, everybody under them. Because I don't expect to see like a book about Bell, for instance. Like Bell will be in a book, but I feel like I don't know, maybe not. Maybe that's a bad explanation. I just feel like something about like these three are like the core of the story. And I found a lot of their story interesting as more and more comes out, you know, that Stellan tends to be like this type of a character, and Elzar tends to be a little bit more like this type of a character. And he might be one who's a little bit more tied with his emotions, or he's like I don't know, he would be more willing to cry, and Stellan would like not. He would like hold the tears back or something, you know what I mean? Or it wouldn't affect him as much. But then how Avar fits into all this too, like in her like relationship that she used to be in with Elzar and stuff. I don't know, just kind of curious your thoughts on the trio, and if you even consider them the trio. I think you said you did.
Yeah, I think that they're a huge, like clearly in the Del Rey books, they're a big part of the arc. Like they're putting these characters kind of front and center. So I think like there's going to be, you know, continuing forward, they're going to develop that story. And that bond is clearly like, because we've kind of heard Avar's and Elzar's, you know, part of this bond, but we hadn't really heard much from Stellan. And you can see how important this is, not only for the three characters, but also for the Jedi Order, because these are three very powerful Jedi. You know, at this point, they're, we've got 2 marshals and a high Jedi master, I think is what they even call him, with Stellan. So, it's honestly like, it's not something like I didn't pick this book up being like, gosh, I wonder what's going to happen with these 3 characters. As I would reach certain points with like where Avar was brought up, or when her, especially how much her absence affected the other 2 characters, that's when I'd be like, I hope we get them back together. And I think in the next book we are going to see them, and they're each going to be profoundly changed. Stellan was by this book, and Elzar, and then we know Avar is off fighting the Drendir in another part of the galaxy. So I think, and
I was gonna say, not to toot my own horn there, but I do like that comparison of Force Awakens, like Han and Leia, and how their relationship was in the absence of Luke.
Yes, in the absence of
like
Luke.
Han saying, like, I don't know, some people say he went looking for the first Jedi temple, and Leia being like, we have to find him. He's our last hope for the galaxy, and all this. Like, the fact that he's gone says a lot about their relationship, as well.
Right.
So
right.
I don't know. I think that's a good comparison. I agree with you, man. I think Avar's absence in this book is really interesting, because it gives us a little bit of a vantage point on what happens when, I guess the sequel trilogy kind of did this too, but like what happens when our characters are split up. And I actually, now that I'm thinking about it, maybe it is more of a Star Wars thing than I'm thinking.
Yeah, they do it a lot, and it's in the second act
Empire Strikes
tradition,
Back.
kind of, yeah.
Like Luke is on his own thing in Dagobah, and Han and Leia are on their own. So I don't know. I just I liked the absence of Avar in this, even though I'm really excited to see her return, especially in the wake of devastation on Valo. I was very surprised at some points, the writing style of this book, because I thought, this isn't a kid's book.
No.
But it's still Star Wars. And it always surprises me when Star Wars has like beheadings and stuff in it. Like, not that this book did, but one very shocking moment in this book where we had I don't want to say a major character, but a very important character to the plot just killed, like, out of nowhere. Yeah. And that was, I actually can't remember her name off the top. Mantrisa?
Mantrisa, yeah.
The mother?
Yeah.
The one that was trying to sell the equipment. She shows up in Race to Crash Point Tower, and she was in this book for a large majority of it. And I'm like, okay, I'm getting used to this character. And out in the thick of this battle, where there's smoke, and I have this idea of like, there's fog everywhere and you just can't see anything, but you hear screaming and you hear like devastation around you. You don't know where to go. She runs off into the fog, and then you hear her like scream, and they chase after her. And when they eventually make their way over to her, it's described that one of the like lions or loose animals was just eating her.
Yeah. It's
like,
it's gnarly,
and in bloody detail, like blood and entrails and everything, like just like feeding off of her and ripping her apart. And I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
I was very astonished that how a lot of times Star Wars suffers, in my opinion, because we don't see major characters die. And and Marvel does this too, but like they always try to like make one character have a big story so that they can get rid of him, like an Agent Coulson or something. Like, we're going to make him really important so that we can kill him, but it's not actually killing any one of the main characters, the real characters, something like that. Star Wars always kind of does that. In this instance is no different, because this was not a major character, but it was very surprising when it happened, because I was like, oh shoot, they just killed her. She's dead.
Yeah.
And now that girl doesn't have family,
right?
And like, what is her storyline going to be, which we obviously find out has more to do with the Nihil and all this. But it's I was very happy with a lot of the described battle scenes on Valo.
Right. Yeah. I
especially even the image that they put out with Stellan like flipping his lightsaber around, and you see like Chancellor So like standing up there like with her hand out like commanding the herd like dog animals or whatever, and I'm just like, this is legit. Like, are we about to get this in this book? This is crazy, and it all pays off, man.
Yeah, it really does.
The battle over the course of like 40% of the book is nuts. Yeah.
Well, and I think one of the reasons that it succeeds, and I think I mentioned this in my review, because I was kind of annoyed that there's like 75 chapters in this book, and I was like, when I picked it up, I was like, what the hell? And then
side note, 75 chapters,
because I was like, and some of them are like 2 pages. But then I started to realize when we got to the action, I'm like, okay, this is really clever what he's doing, because he's making a clear break of like, okay, you're going here now, and then you're going here now, and you're going here now. And it sounds confusing, but I think when most people read it, they'll kind of appreciate that there are that many breaks in the chapters, and that
it felt like characters had colors.
Yes.
Like if the chapters, like when you turn the page, you're on a blue page, you turn the page, all of a sudden now you're on a red page, because it just starts and it's like, there was Bell, and he woke up from his crash, and you're like, okay, cool. And just like, then you would read those red pages, you turn the page again and it's green. You're like, oh, we're back to the greens, like picking up where green left off. Yeah, it felt very clear in each one where I was at.
Yes. Yeah. And that's I think another, because action can lose me sometimes in books. The Alphabet Squadron trilogy is a great example of that. Wasn't crazy about the first book. The second book was okay. The third book was great, but I feel like it's because Freed at that point, he kind of had nailed down how to write action sequences without getting lost in the techno babble, or like the X-Wing V-27 thing is, swooping here or something. And whereas here
and
too,
it helped that we actually, the Alphabet Squadron books were the reason I did what happened in. That we started doing that, because I was so confused by the first book that when the second book came around, I was like, I really wish this existed, and it doesn't. So I'm going to create it for everybody else. We should probably go back and do what happened in the original Alphabet Squadron.
Maybe.
But no, I agree with you. I think there was something like after we did the first book, then when we jumped into the second book, we had a better vibe. And I feel like that also applies here. Is like when we picked up, I felt that I already kind of knew a little bit about some of these characters.
Yes.
And picking up where they left off, you know what I mean? Like, they're like Loden Greatstorm. I didn't have to be like, okay, who's this guy? I'm like, oh, Loden, we're back. Like, I want to know what's going on with him. So I was immediately invested into some of these chapters, more so than I was even in Light of the Jedi.
Right. Yeah. No, totally. It really did provide a great foundation to kind of jump right into this. So,
Speaking of Loden Greatstorm, he's dead.
Yes.
Do you think I gotta imagine he's dead, right? Doornail dead. Do you? I don't know, man. Here's the thing, and spoiler for another movie, Raya and the Last Dragon or whatever. A lot of the characters get turned to stone in that movie, and then you're like, oh, they're dead. But then they kind of come back. He turns to stone or ash, and then the only thing that makes me think he's not coming back is they made it very clear to say that the ash like falls apart.
Yeah.
But I'm like, we don't know anything about what the leveler is. Is there any chance that when the leveler gets resealed or something, that these Jedi, the innocent people, are returned through the Force or something? Or do you just, read it at face value, they wanted to kill off a major character?
I read it as he's dead. I don't think they would.
He's dead.
Yeah, I agree. That's possible, but I think that they were very much like that was like, that was kind of like the final straw, and that's the thing that's gonna like that, because the last line of the book, big spoiler here, but is Stellan was afraid, or for the first time, Stellan was afraid, felt afraid, and I think that was the thing to be like, this is what's going to really, aside from the massive attack that happened, if there were any doubt in the Jedi's mind about taking this threat seriously, this was it. Because then now they probably don't know what the leveler is. Yoda's kind of investigating that in the comic series, the High Republic Adventures, but he doesn't even know what he's going after. He just knows that there's something bad out there. So they're definitely going to be like, okay, what in the world happened? And also I'm very worried about Bell. Like, is he going to be able to even tell them what happened? Because he doesn't even know what happened. So,
the one thing I'll say, I liked that they killed the main character, and that's good. Because I felt like it was a character too that was like, very much like didn't deserve to die. He was a very strong Jedi Master, good guy through and through. The one thing that I thought was very interesting, and this is not, when I say they, I'm not talking about Marchion Ro. I'm talking about the Mile. I'm actually talking about Cavan Scott, the writer, right? And the story group or whoever is behind this. They didn't kill him in Light of the Jedi. They kept him alive. And I thought, okay, that's fine. They're going to keep him alive, and he's probably going to get rescued or something later, or he's going to break out of here later. So when all of that was happening in this book, I was like, oh, this is all playing out. But the thing is that all of that was for nothing. They kept him alive in the last book just so that they could have him, through the existence of this book, be in jail, be tortured, make it out, like walking outside of the prison and being like, oh, I haven't seen the sun in 1,000 years, and then get shot in the head. Yeah. Why did that happen?
I don't know.
It's so crazy to me that they kept him alive specifically, and the only thing he added was he was the one that when he finally got free of the prison, he got outside and was like, we're going to be back together now. We made it out. Good. Dead. Yeah. And then we don't even see him die. We see the leveler gets revealed, and then we find out that he is dead. Yeah.
And that's, so maybe you do have a point, because I haven't really thought about it like that. Like, maybe there is some greater purpose for that. And maybe, or, we find out he's been communing through the forest with Mari Santeca or Mary Santeca. Sorry, keep messing that name up. But they've been communicating through the force. So maybe there's some sort of like he was her hope, or he gave her hope, or something like that. But it seemed kind of more vice versa. But I don't know if there's something to that connection as well. Like, maybe he woke something up inside of her. Because she kind of sacrifices herself a little bit to get him out too. So there must be something that I'm missing, that there'll be a greater part of his story. But at the end of the day too, it might just be like, hey, yeah, we got to kill this character. Sorry. Gotta give something to, to kind of hit home how bad this weapon is. So, but yeah, I don't know. It's sad. When you think of it like that, it really sucks. So,
yeah, it's nuts, man. Loden is a weird choice for death. I get it, but like I was saying, just leaving him alive for that length, and then killing him off. I don't think they're bringing him back. I definitely think it was what it was, but I just thought it was very interesting choice and kind of shocking. And there's a little bit of loss with Bell too, which is kind of interesting. That for me is basically the wrap up of this book. I did want to ask you maybe just really quickly, where you think this is going as far as the Acolyte, being at the end of the High Republic era. If you think I don't know, just kind of predictions for that show. Do you think it's going to have some of these characters show up and kind of catalog a retelling of these events leading up to it or whatever?
I do. Yeah. I do think it'll involve these characters, but I think it ultimately is going to set the stage kind of for to bookend this era. And we're going to see maybe where the Sith start to reemerge. That's kind of my theory about the Acolyte, is that we'll kind of see how the dark side kind of comes back into the galaxy as this. And, perhaps the Leveler and Marchion Ro are a small part of that, but they're not even aware, like that type of thing.
Yeah.
And that's kind of my theory with the Acolyte. And I loved Russian Doll, so I'm very excited to see what she does with that show.
I like what you were saying too about the characters from Jedi Lost and are kind of in this story as well, and maybe that's where it's kind of leading in the Sith and all that. I just thought it was kind of interesting because I feel like Light of the Jedi and this book, Rising Storm, have been kind of the major tent poles of the High Republic.
Absolutely.
By the way, I just also wanted to mention too, Rising Storm, little bit of a missed opportunity with the title there. I thought for sure the Rising Storm was a reference to like a storm of Nihil that was going to like overpower, and I'm like, oh, it's like the Rising Storm of evil, but also when you read through it, you're like, oh, Return of the Jedi was Anakin, kind of like this reveal of something with like a different understanding. It's not the Jedi people, it's the Jedi, specifically this guy. Kind of thing, but it never did. It didn't have anything to do with a rising storm. It's almost like the book being called like the Rising Cloud or something, the Rising Tempest or something. But no, total missed opportunity. That is basically it for me on this book. I think this pretty much wraps up everything. I did want to say, thanks for hanging out, number one, on this video for as long as you have. We hope you enjoyed the discussion and the spoiler talk and everything like that. If you guys don't know, like I forget if we mentioned it before, but we have that other video that talks about what happened in the story, so you can get the full summary of the plot. If you haven't checked that out, this book also happens concurrently with Race to Crash Point Tower.
Race to Crash Point Tower, yes.
Yeah. So we also did another video on that where we discuss the book in one video, and in another video we just tell you basically what happened with no review or spoilers or any of our opinions in it. Not to mention though too, we've done this for a lot of the other books in High Republic, so if you ever want just like a complete crash course in what's been going on, they're all there for you. We do that for you guys. And if you want to return the favor, hey man, like the video, share it, subscribe, let your friends know about Star Wars Newsnet. We're doing lots of videos on this channel, so that would be great. Leave a comment, let us know what you thought of the book, of the video, whatever it is, the High Republic in general. Let's start a discussion. That is it for this video. Kyle, where can people find you online?
You can find me on Twitter at Kyle D. Larson, and I also contribute book and comic reviews to Star Wars and Newsnet pretty regularly, and contribute to What the Force Show as well.
All right. And you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at MyraChunks, as well as regularly on the Resistance Broadcast, which is a video podcast and audio podcast that we do for Star Wars Newsnet, as well as all these other book discussion videos, occasionally on Clone Wars reviews and Bad Batch reviews, stuff like that. So check that stuff out. And until next time, we'll see you later.
Thanks, everyone.